The very good YouTube boxing channel known as Rummy's Corner did a video very recently about Canelo Alvarez. Is he the greatest 168-pound fighter of all time? Obviously no, as the video quickly underlined. But he is building something of a legacy there, having just become undisputed. Of the three guys Rummy put at the top, Roy Jones, Andre Ward, and Joe Calzaghe, it's Joe Calzaghe who I was most familiar with, who I watched most of his career unfold in real time. And when it was all said and done, Joe Calzaghe did retire undefeated, as most of us are aware. He got his big wins finally. After all those terrible defenses, he defeats Jeff Lacey and Mikhail Kessler. I don't really like to talk about the Hopkins or the Jones fights. They were kind of sour experiences for me because the Hopkins fight was super close and Jones was just totally past it. So they don't mean as much. Whereas the Lacey and the Kessler fights were the big uns. They're the ones that give Calzaghe that substance at 168. And honestly, I think the Lacey victory has become a little bit underrated as the years have gone by. It wasn't a bad victory at all. I know people jokingly say now if you ship a loss that you never recover from, you got Lacey'd. But that guy was doing his best for 12 rounds, and he took a shell-lacking in there. He showed some real bravery. Now, somebody who has well and truly lost the opportunity of retiring undefeated is, of course, Canelo Alvarez. Floyd Mayweather defeated him in 2013 pretty easily. And some people feel Canelo should have 2 or maybe even 3 losses on that record. But because of his recent surge at 168, some people feeling he is now at his true peak. People are wondering how would he do against the all-time elite at 168? How would he stack up? How would he fare? Well, Joe Calzaghe had the question put to him recently. How would you have done against Canelo Alvarez? And the Welsh Dragon made no bones about it. He was definitely backing himself. And I would have to go along with Joe there. If there's one thing that Alvarez really doesn't respond well to, it's being forced to fight at a high pace. Nobody's really been able to stick it to him in that way so far. The second Golovkin fight was pretty good. I basically had it a draw. But that was an older Gennady, who never even in his prime had anything like the engine of Joe Calzaghe. I like how Canelo has evolved. I like the way he was a bit more upright. Now he's a bit more hunched over, cutting off the ring better, hunting down bigger men. It's cool. But Calzaghe knows how to make you work. He has the trickiness that a Caleb Plant has, who was able to land his jab against Canelo. He was throwing it from the hip, he was disguising it. Well, Calzaghe blends the trickiness with the work rate. He will find ways to hold Canelo accountable during those 3 minutes. Now, the danger for Joe is that he gets a little bit too boisterous, which he did do in his career. He would go in with those slappy combinations, as people like to call them. He could hold his feet a little bit too long and get hit with the kind of shot he did against Cabrera Salim. Massive right hook. You don't have to be a true world-class fighter for that to do serious damage. But in all the 4 times that Calzaghe got floored in his career, not only did he show a really good chin, he showed tremendous powers of recovery. So it's easy to envision a guy who counterpunches as well as Canelo definitely could floor Joe. But we have to assume, off everything we know, Calzaghe is getting back up and resuming control. Mixing up his attack, flicking out the jab, spoiling if need be. And against the likes of a Hopkins, though I hate that fight, Calzaghe showed how he was able to adapt mid-fight. And that's really tough. Very few people can adapt mid-fight. They come into the ring with a couple of game plans. If they don't work, they don't know what to do. Wasn't the case with Calzaghe. He had that true great intuition, that in the moment sense of what to do if something wasn't working. And so he would find ways to keep making Canelo fight at a pace that he finds disagreeable. I think we saw elements of the Calzaghe game plan in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, where Canelo, before the very last round, just seemed to get a little bit tactically stressed. He was talking with Eddie Reynoso in the corner. They were reiterating what they needed to do. He was finding it hard to pin Billy Joe down at that moment, before the cheekbone caving shot landed. Well, with Calzaghe, I don't think there's going to be any shot that caves in his face. Too tough, too smart. The likes of a Billy Joe, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, I think they flattered Canelo's power, who's always been able to crack, but isn't a guy you'd really define as a big puncher. Those guys are really unproven at the weight. Billy Joe didn't look good at 168. Callum Smith has now scurried up to 175. And Caleb Plant has got it all to prove now, and showing just kind of what worth he has at 168 pounds. Calzaghe's chin has been tested so many times. He's not going to succumb to any of those single blasts. So yeah, I would certainly be picking Joe Calzaghe to win, which isn't much of an outrageous statement if you remember how good Calzaghe was and you're not too blinded by Canelo's recent exploits. He has looked good, he's done what he's needed to do, but I can't help but be skeptical with the kind of guys he has beaten. Calzaghe, with his work rate, his trickiness, his ability to adapt, I have to go with him, gun to my head. But what do you think about this hypothetical matchup that I still would definitely pay for if it was available? Who is your pick between these two classic fighters?